Hey, Clemson family, let's look into some of the things Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei and offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter had to say about this week's opponent to start the 2022 season.
I'm Daniel Shirley. We'll also be joined by Roy Philpott from ESPN as he takes his look at the Tigers from the national angle and where he thinks the Tigers fit in this year going into the season.
I'm Bill Zimmerman, and welcome to episode 20 of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button so we can keep you up with the latest big happenings in Clemson sports, and you won't miss out. You can find our homepage at clemsonkickoff.com. We've got links to all the major podcast apps there. You can also find us when you just search Clemson and scroll just a little bit. We're on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff, and we upload our audio to youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff, where we also post shorts when big news breaks. Wherever you listen, we are glad you found us. Well, first, let's get into the interviews that took place Wednesday, and two of the more illuminating ones were with DJ Uiagalelei and Brandon Streeter.
They were really interesting, Bill. I'll start with DJ. And DJ talked about last year's Georgia Tech game, and of course, that's who the Tigers will open the season with. And he mentioned how physical that game was. And that was the game where we had the long lightning delay, and you had to sit and wait for the game to restart. I was at that game. It was a weird game. DJ had a couple of big plays with his legs to help the team win the game and kind of put that game away, even though it was a little closer than you would have expected or hoped going in. And maybe that's something we'll see from him this year with him using his legs a little bit more.
Well, we also heard from Brandon Streeter, who kind of, I don't want to say walked things back, but maybe gave a little more immediate perspective on playing time for DJ's challenger.
I was surprised by this. What was it, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where Brandon said Cade Klubnik was definitely going to play. And then this week he says, I'm not sure if he's going to play in this game. So he did say he's earned time and he's earned the right to play this season, but maybe that's not this week. And I was really surprised by that.
So does this change anything the way you see it as Clemson heads into this opening challenge against Georgia Tech? It's in a supposed neutral site, but it does count as a home game. It's certainly not the typical Georgia Tech atmosphere. I'm not sure I'm really all that thrown, although I am surprised to hear the different take this time on Klubnik's playing time. But I do expect to see them both. And it's just a matter of maybe not expecting Klubnik so early this time, whereas the previous comments maybe had that expectation.
I was surprised by the difference in the tone this week as opposed to the previous statements about Cade. But I don't know what that changes, to be honest, Bill. Was this a walking back, or was this a ploy to not let Georgia Tech know the plan? Or was this a play to not put more pressure on DJ? I don't know what that was today, but I guess we'll find out on Monday when the game is played. So this does bring a little more intrigue to what's going to happen with the quarterback plan. I'm not sure it changes anything, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we find out on Monday.
Yeah, I'd probably be more concerned if he had talked about, well, we have 4 receivers who aren't going to play or something of that nature. I do think that it's going to be run heavy. Maybe this telegraphs that a little bit, that they think they can leave Uiagalelei in there longer, that they don't think they're losing a lot of developmental reps with Klubnik if they're bringing him in late. But I'm probably overthinking it by going that far with it, aren't I?
Maybe, and I'll be surprised if Cade doesn't play. Right? I mean, if this is a game that Clemson wins by 3 touchdowns, and Clemson is a 21.5-point favorite, I believe. But it feels like if it's that kind of a game, then Cade Klubnik should play. I mean, we need to see what he is in a college environment. I think the coaches need to see it. The teammates probably need to see it. So it feels like if they're in that kind of a game that Cade's going to play. And maybe he plays before that. Maybe all this is a ruse. Who knows? But it certainly caught my eye and my ear today when Brandon said that.
Follow us on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff, and we will keep you posted. If any major news happens, we will get a short out there, or maybe, like you and I keep threatening, the emergency podcast, right?
A couple of those, right? We're going to try to do those game night, right? Looking forward to that. So those are going to be a lot of fun as well.
Should be a blast. Well, we're joined now by one of ESPN's best voices in the booth, Roy Philpott, who is also very familiar with Clemson as a Clemson grad. Roy, thank you very much for taking time to join us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Fun time of year. For the most part, nobody's lost a game yet, so everybody's in a good mood, and that makes these podcasts that much better, in my opinion.
Well, this one's better today because you're on here, so let's just make that obvious here. So, but Roy, you are flying all over the country, going to games. You're going to Michigan State this week. But what are your thoughts on the Tigers after what you saw from this team last year?
Yeah, I want to see what's happening on offense. I mean, I think most of us understand the defense and the front seven in particular are going to be very difficult to score on. And look, I want to see Brian Brzee healthy. I think they're going to work him kind of into the mix as methodically as they can with Ruka Rororo doing his thing. And I think that's good to see on the depth chart today. They're going to be hard to score against. My question is, what does this offense look like? Do we see more tempo? Do we see the ball come out on time from DJ Uiagalelei? If anybody's listened to me talk Clemson football at any point this year in 2022, that's my beef. I mean, it's just the ball came out late in the spring game that we called for ESPN, came out late for the most part last year. That's not to say he didn't improve somewhat over last season. I thought he did. 6-game winning streak to close out this season. That's the longest in the Power 5. That's significant as well. He's lost weight. They're going to run him more. You hear a lot of good things, but I haven't heard a ton yet about his accuracy and his touch and the ball coming out on time. I think we're going to know by the early stages of the second quarter if everything we've kind of heard and what we're hoping for, if you're a Clemson fan, is there and it's out in the open, or if it's not. I think it's going to be pretty transparent pretty quickly. So really, probably not unlike most fans or media members, I think a lot of people are intrigued to see what does DJ Uiagalelei look like? Is it more like 2020? Is it more like 2021? And if it's more like 2020, it's game on. If it's more like what we saw last season, then listen, I think there's a reasonable chance that Klubnik is a big factor this year, probably sooner rather than later. But we can't say that until we actually see a game, coming up against Georgia Tech on Labor Day night.
And Roy, they got to help him too, right? The offensive line has to be better. The receivers have to be better. That's a big key to this as well. And I think that especially the offensive line has to be better than it was last year.
Yeah, it does. And I was really encouraged to hear about that first scrimmage and the O-line one-upping the defensive line. I don't know. I can't remember a time in the last decade where we've heard that kind of conversation. And it sounds like Blake Miller's done a good job as a freshman. That there's comparisons to Mitch Hyatt. I think that's encouraging. And listen, I'll say this. I think it's okay if Clemson lines up with two backs and feeds, Maffa and Pace and obviously Will Shipley a bunch of footballs on the ground. And if DJ runs it a good bit on the ground, and if that's how you win these first couple of weeks and DJ is efficient, with that defense, I think that makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, the fact that the offensive line has made strides is significant. I have questions about wide receiver as well. EJ Williams has been banged up. Collins has been banged up. And do they have like a real playmaker there? I mean, I don't see a Sammy Watkins or DeAndre Hopkins or Martavis Bryant. So can somebody like that emerge that we don't know about? Maybe a freshman. I'm curious there. But, right now this team looks like it's a team built on the ground game, maybe on its tight ends and its defense. So, do you beat Georgia Tech 20-6 or 24-10 or something like that? Is that enough to satisfy the masses and to build momentum towards NC State and Wake Forest in October? I don't know, possibly, but I guess it all just depends on how it looks and how DJ looks, etc.
Roy, we saw the preseason polls are all out. We know those don't really matter as far in the grand scheme of things. But where do you think Clemson stacks up right now going into the season nationally?
I think at the very top, there's Ohio State, there's Alabama, although I think there's a dearth of talent at wide receiver at Alabama right now. They're dealing with their own injuries. And there's always that Heisman winner coming back. Can he do it again? Nobody's ever done it with Bryce Young. He's going to be good. And then, look, I've got questions at Georgia. They lost 15 players to NFL draft. And I recognize the great job Kirby Smart has done recruiting. Am I entirely convinced that Stetson Bennett is going to be the mailman like what he was last year? Not especially. And I think Georgia fans get a little uneasy, with where things are there. But look, he won them a national championship last season. They got the issues off their back, so to speak, by winning that first national title in 40 years. So that's a difference maker. I would put Ohio State and Alabama in that top category. And then I think Clemson, I think, Notre Dame, maybe Michigan mixed in there, and really like a team like Oklahoma with Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Levy now calling plays. I don't think you can underestimate what they're doing there with Brent Venables. They're kind of in that tier that's trying to make that jump back up. And look, I just need to see about a half of football. And if DJ is anywhere close to what people hope he is, and maybe what we've seen in flashes, then yeah, they're poised to make a run. If he's not, then you got to get Klubnik ready and hope that he's going to be good enough. I think he can be, based off what I've heard, but you got to grow him up in the month of September if that's what it's going to take. So, yeah, I mean, the talent is there. The coaching is there, in my opinion. I like some of Brandon Streeter's kind of new looks with the offense and what we've heard. So I think they're knocking on the door, but you just have to settle things at quarterback. And I can't say that enough in so many different ways, just to, if you're going to do this thing and you're going to make a run back to the playoff and prove that last year's 10-3 is an anomaly, even as decent as it ended up being, you got to have something happen at quarterback much more than what we saw last year.
Roy, you mentioned Brent Venables being gone and now he's at Oklahoma. Any concerns about the kind of the new look coaching staff, even though a lot of the faces had been around for a little bit?
No, I mean, defensively with Wes Goodwin coming in, and I mean, we spent some time with him before the spring game, and this is just something he's been building towards from his time in the NFL with the Cardinals to his time under Brent Venables. I mean, it just feels like that Dabo told Brent when he left to go to OU, you can't take Wes because, he's going to be our new guy. And all the players and other coaches that have worked with him just swear by him that he is a genius of sorts on that side of the ball. So, no, I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off there. I think it's going to be different than what Brent Venables did. It's a guy that doesn't get emotional on the sideline. He's more low-key, so that part is different, and maybe that change isn't a bad thing after a decade with Brent. No offense to him at all. So I really don't expect much of a drop-off there. On offense, I think it just comes down to quarterback, and can Brandon Streeter be that quarterback whisperer, replacing Tony Elliott as a full-time play caller, and just get every ounce of positivity out of DJ Uiagalelei that he possibly can. I think it's possible. I mean, I really do. Everything that happened in 2020, those 2 starts that he made, those weren't flukish deals. He came in and threw for more yards against Notre Dame on the road than any other quarterback in the history of Notre Dame. That wasn't just, something that was accidental. He also played very well against BC that previous week. Got to go back to that somehow. Brandon Streeter is going to be charged with it. His success and how we view him, I think, comes down to that this season.
It's amazing the difference in DJ from 2 years ago to last year. So that's going to be a big key for this season. What about the schedule? Obviously Georgia Tech is first, but what are the games that jump out at you that are like, okay, this is a hurdle they've got to get past?
NC State for sure. And I think it's important to build momentum towards that game. Obviously running the table before then, which, I mean, Clemson's going to be heavy favorites in all those games. We understand that. But just getting the offense back to a state where it looks respectable, it's clicking. Again, the ball's not coming out late. Devin Leary, NC State, Dave Doran, their defense, the talent that they've developed there in Raleigh, it's legitimate top 15 team. They would have won 10 games last year had UCLA been able to play in its bowl game. That was a bit of a disappointment. But, yeah, NC State's a hurdle. At Notre Dame later in the season is a hurdle. And put me in the category that thinks Miami, they're not back. But Miami, I think, is going to give Texas A&M all kinds of trouble in week number 3. Circle that game with Tyler Van Dyke. I know what Miami has with him. I don't know what Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher have at quarterback out in College Station. I think Miami's got a great chance to serve itself well, to announce its return back to the national scene and assist the ACC in that week 3 game at Kyle Field. So Miami at the end of the season, I would not be shocked at all if that's the first of 2 games that are played between the Tigers and the Hurricanes, and maybe a preview of sorts for the ACC championship. Those 3 games to me stand out. I recognize the road trip to Wake Forest. Let's see if Sam Hartman can get healthy for head coach Dave Clawson. Clemson really had the kryptonite for that offense and the slow mesh concepts last year. It's a game that I called. We saw it firsthand, and Clemson just did not allow anything to happen with what they like to do. Now, Dave Clawson's smart enough to switch that up this go around. I think Clemson just matches up pretty well with Wake Forest, just as it has for the last 10 to 12 years. So, it's a challenge. It's on the road in Winston-Salem. But NC State, Notre Dame, and Miami are the games I've circled And, can you go 2-1 in those games? Can you run the table in those games? I still think an 11-1 Clemson goes to the playoff. The metrics tell us that right now, especially if one of those losses comes to those three teams and you still win the ACC. I think you're fine. But we'll see. There's definite hurdles on the schedule. This thing's a little tougher than most people realize.
Yeah, I think that 5 teams in the top 25 in the ACC. I know we bang on the ACC a lot, but it feels like there's good quarterback play in the conference this year.
There's great quarterback play. I mean, whether it's Devin Leary, if Sam Hartman can get healthy, Tyler Van Dyke, which we talked about, Phil Dracovic returns back to Boston College. He was being talked about this time last year as a potential first-round draft pick. It's a huge year for the conference because, listen, perception is reality. And the reality is right now that people feel like the ACC is there for the taking with conference realignment. You put together a season league-wide where, let's say, FSU bounces back, Miami stays in the top 15, NC State and Clemson do. Let's say you keep 5 teams ranked and multiple teams battling for top 10, top 5, and maybe a playoff run. That changes everybody's mindset. There could not be a more pivotal year in the history of the conference to do that, just to announce, hey, we belong as one of the Power 3 or Power 4 leagues. We belong because our football is strong. We belong because this league is capable of winning a national championship, not just Clemson as well. So, yeah, some of the blue bloods, especially Miami, we're looking at you down in Coral Gables. Put together a 10-2, 11-1 season, challenge for the top 10, stay in the top 25. No weird losses at unexpected times. Handle your business at Texas A&M and a winnable game for the Canes. Do those things. It really starts to change how people view the ACC. I can't tell you how important that is right now with all the rumors swirling regarding conference realignment and things of that sort. The league really needs to put its best foot forward this year.
Talk about putting your best foot forward. I think Clemson needs to do a lot of that. There's a lot of talk. There are some people who say, well, last year was just kind of a blip. Other people are chomping at the bit to call it the beginning of the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think both sets of people are kind of, not really getting into the details. So I like how detailed your description is. David Hale was the same way when we had him on the other day. What do you think Clemson has to do to convince those people who are just kind of looking at it from afar and saying, oh, this is over. We're finally rid of Clemson being part of the national picture longer than we wanted them to be?
Let's start off the field first, because if you look at their recruiting right now, most of the services have the class easily within the top 10. And in terms of star rankings, it ranks inside the top 5, if not the top 4. So the prediction of the demise of the program, very much exaggerated. You could argue that this class they have coming in is as good as any of the other classes that Dabo Swinney's ever signed. So in terms of the future and building that foundation, it looks to be, in this crazy NIL world that we're living in now, it looks to be as strong as it's ever been. So you got to dig a little deeper before you start talking about the demise. Now, nobody could have predicted the injuries at wide receiver last year, the injuries on the offensive line last year. All that played a factor in addition to DJ Uiagalelei's struggles. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of different circumstances occurring at the same time. The offense wasn't pretty and people aren't used to that. So I understand why people look at it and say, oh, yeah, they're getting ready to go back to what they were in 2010. Well, the recruiting doesn't tell you that. But now the on the field play needs to indicate that as well. And so, if you go 10-2, as weird as this sounds this year, then people will kind of continue that narrative unless you beat somebody big time in one of the New Year's 6 bowl games. That could help resurrect perception, so to speak. But I just think, the offense needs to look more intact, more cohesive, needs to develop its own brand again. And that starts with good quarterback play. So, yeah, I mean, look, they're still there in terms of facilities. They're developing their NIL strategy. I think that's coming along quite nicely. Do think you'll see Dabo Swinney more active in the transfer portal where it makes sense moving forward. They try to get a couple of offensive linemen in the offseason via the portal. Didn't happen. That doesn't mean that's the end of their efforts, going into the next cycle. I think they'll transform themselves a little bit there just because they have to, just like everyone else. But really it just comes down to, okay, can you finish the regular season better than 9-3? Can this offense look more competent than last year? And you start putting up big numbers again. You do those things and you enter October undefeated, people will start to jump back on the bandwagon. But look, I mean, they've set the bar so high, you're kind of you're at the mercy of your own success where, a disappointing year, in 2022 is not being in playoff contention, not reaching the college football playoff, because you made it 6 straight years. In the first year you didn't make it, you're now at this kind of fork in the road situation where you have to prove last year was a fluke. So, look, I mean, whether we like it or not, whether Clemson fans like it or not, you got to go back out and prove yourself again this year, even though you've won 2 national championships in the last 6 seasons, even though you made 6 straight college football playoffs. A 10-3 year where the offense just didn't look like it had any kind of continuity whatsoever. People still remember that. And they want to kind of paint you into a corner as quickly as possible. So, you look, perception is reality. Whether we like it or not, that's where we are. It's a social media crazy world we live in. And they got to go out and kind of prove themselves all over again if you care about what the national perception is.
And we were talking beforehand, you sound like you're going to be able to get to watch a lot more Clemson football this year than usual. You're going to have the Friday night games on ESPN, and that's going to start with a fun one at Michigan State, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll be there up in East Lansing this week. We're getting up there Wednesday night, and they've got the stripe out going where they've got one section in green, the other section in white to sell out. Michigan State won 11 games last year, orchestrated their biggest turnaround from one year to the next in school history under Mel Tucker in his second season. They got Peyton Thorne back, Jaden Reed back, a bunch of big-time players. And look, they're very aggressive in the transfer portal. Mel Tucker looks at it like the NFL and free agency. He's told me that on more than one occasion back from his time in Colorado. Learned that under Nick Saban and Kirby Smart at Alabama and Georgia, respectively, where he was an assistant coach for those guys. So, yeah, I mean, there's a team right now that's being undervalued more than Michigan State. I would like to see it because it seems like everybody's forgotten 11 wins, Peach Bowl victory against Pittsburgh. And they got a lot of key weapons back and a pretty salty defense trying to figure things out. I think they're going to be a big-time factor in the Big Ten, but, they're preseason number 15 and still nobody's talking about them. So, yeah, we're excited. They play Western Michigan Friday night, 7 o'clock primetime on ESPN. My first trip there to call a football game. But I think it's going to be pretty rowdy, which is really all you can ask for this early in the season.
I think we're all excited to see things really firing back up. It was fun last Saturday, but the full slate this week ought to be a lot of fun and a lot of excitement. So we really appreciate you taking time during a busy schedule for yourself and joining us to sort of, again, bring that national perspective in, that sort of exposure to outside opinions and bring that in and blend that with your knowledge of Clemson football. And I hope we can have you back sometime.
Yeah, love to do it, gentlemen. Appreciate the invite. And, hey, football's here. There's a reason for all of us to celebrate that.
Be sure to check out our homepage at clemsonkickoff.com. Well, if any news breaks in the next few days leading up to kickoff, we'll be sure to react to that as well. We'll find a way to get the word out about what it means for the Tigers. And then on the pitch, there are a few things to thinking about as well.
2 huge games for the men's and women's soccer teams coming up Thursday night. And Friday night. Clemson will travel to Columbia, the women on Thursday, the men on Friday. Can't wait to see those 2 rivalry games and see how the Tigers do in those games and get off to a great start in the Palmetto series. I know everybody's always excited about that.
Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed this, and we are glad you found us, Clemson family. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Give us a follow on a podcast app. We'll keep you up to speed every time big news happens. Our homepage has some great resources. Check that out at clemsonkickoff.com. All our episodes are there. All our shorts are there. You can head back to our Georgia Tech preview episode, where you can shuffle through all the position breakdowns in the preseason as well. Follow us on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We'll retweet news as it happens there. We'll also maybe throw in an opinion here or there in real time as well. Until the next episode after the season opening game, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.